Good morning, everybody. Looks like it's 9 a.m. and it's time to get started. This is Anna Bessel, Assistant Manager of Engineering Programs for the Metropolitan Council Environmental Services Division. I'd like to welcome you to the 2020 Budget Webinar. We currently have about 50 participants on the line, and I believe we're expecting some more to pop in. So thank you for joining us. I have a few housekeeping items to cover before we begin. Attendees are muted and video has been disabled to preserve bandwidth. We had over 60 people register, so I can assure you that you are not alone in attending this webinar. Although you are muted, we encourage you to comment and ask a question throughout the presentation using the chat box. To view the chat box, simply click on your screen so a row of buttons appear. Then click on the chat button and send the comment to all participants. Comments and questions will be responded to after the presentation during the Q&A session. We will be recording this webinar for note-taking purposes, and we will post it on our website after the event. When you exit the meeting, a short survey will pop up in your web browser. Please take a few moments to provide feedback on this webinar. We have several presenters today, which we're very excited about. First, we have Metropolitan Council Chair Charlie Zelli, followed by Ned Smith, Director of ES Finance and Revenue, then Kyle Colvin, Manager of Engineering Programs for Environmental Services, and Janine Clancy, Assistant General Manager, ES Technical Services. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the Chair of the Metropolitan Council, Charlie Zelli.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Anna, and welcome to this seminar. I really appreciate your spending time with us this morning. I'm relatively new as the chair of the Metropolitan Council, and so on behalf of that 17-person council, it's my honor to welcome you here today. I'm relatively new to the council, and I have gotten much more familiar with the activity that even though I knew, I now know in much greater detail. The one place I really gotten to know was the closet-sized office I'm sitting in right now, so I really appreciate that though we're doing this virtually, we seem to be doing a lot of connections and a lot of our business online, and I think this actual format will probably work pretty well for everybody. I have to say I am new to wastewater, but in environmental services. But even though I have, for a better part of my life, been a customer of both this system and the Minneapolis water, I had the honor of actually, as MnDOT commissioner, making a toast with Minneapolis Water over a bridge during rush hour. So I have been a long fan of both the resources, the work that all the cities do, and now an even greater appreciation having toured some of our main wastewater plant, kind of understanding the process, understanding what is kind of underneath and behind all the activity that as a citizen, I think we often take for granted. I just want to touch on this organizational chart for a minute. We're guided at Met Council by a vision. It's really a mission to foster efficient, environmentally sustainable, and economic growth for the region over time. And I have really learned to appreciate that although we are an operator of transit, environmental services, a lot of other activities, we're largely a planning and a kind of a regional a framer of gaining kind of what we can do efficiently together that isn't necessarily as easy apart. So this truly is kind of a coalition. Environmental services actually serves 110 cities, and these communities represent nearly 2.5 million people. That's about half the population of the state, just in this one service. And we're a utility. Most of our revenue comes from cities, and obviously we have other customers, but I have to appreciate our primary customers, which is cities, and so your voice, your input, your engagement is really critically important. I have been in business for 30 years, and I've learned one thing, and that is a number of things, but one in particular is the relationship with customers is kind of front and center, and maintaining that customer trust is really something that I have known is so critical, and I've just been so impressed by our environmental services staff who really view that as kind of a value that we can be transparent, we can be responsive, and we can be kind of partners. So I really am looking forward myself to learning more about the budgeting process, about how these charges and processes work, and I will kind of hand it off to those who are the experts. But please feel free to reach out to me anytime if you ever have any concerns, and we'll learn here together. And I think we're going to hear from Ned now, so I'll sign off and check in later. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Chair Zelli. Yes, this is Ned Smith. I'm the Director of Finance and Revenue for Met Council Environmental Services, and I really want to thank all of you for taking time to join us today. The purpose of these is to share with you our plans for the following year for the budget and even longer term for capital. So this is a great opportunity to hear from our customers. What are you thinking about? What are your concerns? And how can MCES help? Next slide, please. So we'll start by walking through the 2021 budget, and we'll get straight to the executive summary here. The first thing is that our regional wastewater charge is only going to go up by 2%. We had originally planned that about 3.7%, but realized that COVID was going to require some fiscal austerity. So we trimmed our budget back, our revenue budget back by $4 million. And I'll walk through a little bit more of how we did that. Our sewer availability charge is going to be flat, same charge, $2,485 per SAC unit. That's been in place since January 1 of 2014. So we are still enjoying robust growth, and I'll walk through what that looks like. But the important thing is that's going to be flat. Our industrial waste charge, which is primarily a function of what happens in our broader regional wastewater charge, that's only going to go up 2.4% for the strength. And our permit fees are going to be around 2%, depends on the size of the permit, some a little higher, some a little lower, but on average it's 2%. From an expense or a use perspective, our expenses are growing 3.9% over 2020. That's primarily driven by debt service. And those of you that are quick on math probably notice our revenue isn't going up as fast as our expense. We're going to use some reserves to provide that rate relief, especially that $4 million that we're not going to charge in the regional wastewater charge, and I'll walk through that in two. Next slide, please. So for our proposed revenue sources, it's a total of $323 million. A couple of public service announcements I always like to call out. First of all, we are 100% fee for service. The only source of our money, we are not a tax, and we don't get any federal, state, or council dollars for our operations. We occasionally get some pass-through grants that we pass right through. But in terms of operating our system, we are strictly based on a fee for service. And the other thing important to know is that we have kind of financial firewalls between us and the rest of the council. So no MCES fees can be used for buses or parks or housing. And likewise, bus fares can't be used to operate the Metro treatment plant. So we are fiscally independent or separate from the rest of the council. So you can see our biggest chunk is our municipal wastewater charges at 74%. That's about $240 million. And then second biggest chunk is our sewer availability charge at 18%. That also includes we're going to use some of our SAC reserve. It's about double what the minimum is, the target policy minimum needs to be. So we're going to use some of that reserve to help us with our pay-go as a way to offer rate relief. Pay-go is pay-as-you-go. It's where we use operating funds to pay for capital projects that would have otherwise been financed through debt. And then we have 5% of our income is from the industrial waste charge. 5% of our revenue is from the industrial waste charges, pretty flat to last year. And then we've got 3% other, which includes our use of reserves. So we're going to use some of our SAC reserve, but we're also going to use some of our operating reserves. We've had a couple of years of surpluses back in 2017 and 2018. So we like to turn around and get that back as fast as we can to our customers through rate relief. Next slide, please. For our expenses, you can see that our biggest chunk is debt service at 48%. And I'll walk through a little bit more about debt service trends and how we're managing that. But our second biggest is our salaries and benefits at 23%. And I'll walk through what our labor picture looks like there. And then the rest is kind of evenly distributed across consulting and contractual services. That's things like PMs and security, material supplies and chemicals. We use a lot of chemicals to treat our wastewater. And then in interdivisional services, that's like our centralized services. So that's HR, finance, well, centralized finance, like accounts payable, accounts receivable, legal, and of course, IS, information services, is also in there. And then pay-go is pay-as-you-go. I talked about that earlier. And then there's other. Next slide, please. So we are, 2021 was supposed to be our 4th year of a 5-year commitment to keep our region-wide increase under 4%. When we started planning out the budget in the beginning of February, we modeled out a 3.7% increase, and everything looked great. And then COVID hit, and we realized we were going to need to trim back our budget. So we took $4 million out of our revenue plan and dropped it down to 2% because we were hearing some concerns from our customers that they would not be able to collect all of their revenue. So we're doing our best to tighten our belts as well, as we know our city customers are tightening their belts. The way we did that is, first and foremost, we continued our budget to flat to last year. We're actually in about year 4 of flat to last year. So we're actually flat to about 2017. We haven't materially increased our overall facility plans in about 4 years. Our labor schedule optimization, this is an ongoing process where we are working to schedule to the work, not schedule to the shifts. And our belief is we should be able to be more efficient in our staffing plans up front, and it should reduce the amount of overtime we need when someone can't come in for a shift. We also continue to work on our energy upgrades. Some of that is low-hanging fruits. We've been increasing the use of LED throughout our plants, both in the tunnels and our overhead lights. But then we're doing some bigger projects, more ambitious projects around combined power and heat installations that Janine will walk through. Some of those are a few years out. Some of those are at Metropolitan, where we're working to optimize the turbine that we have there so we can get to a 25% energy generation based on the heat and steam that comes off of our fluidized bed reactors. And then we have asset management teams that are working on optimizing our long-term plans. How do you balance between maintenance, operations, and capital? If you have a piece of equipment, is it cheaper to replace it, or is it cheaper to continue to maintain it for a few more years? And the asset management teams, which are cross-functional with members of operations, maintenance, and the capital team, all work through that for each plant. Next slide, please. For labor efficiencies, we are continuing to keep our labor as efficient as possible. You can see our headcounts going up a little bit, less than 2% for 2021. Those are around some electricians that we need for maintenance in some of our capital programs, and then locators, where we are looking to provide additional service to our customers to help find our facilities faster and easier. But the thing we like to remember is that back in the 90s, we were at 1,200. So we're still a little over half of where we were in the 90s. And we're always looking for additional efficiencies, but we're also sensitive to the increased level of service that we need to meet, particularly around odor management. And also as we add new plants around Rogers, we are growing our staff there. Next slide, please. This is our debt service changes. So this is year over year, and this is our what we like to call our, well, we hate to call it, but it's there, the debt service bubble. This is actually left over from the recession in 2008 and 2009. There was extreme rate pressure there, and so we did what was called debt smoothing, which pushed some of the principal payments out later into the future, and the future is now. So you can see for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been facing $8 to $9 million increases in our debt service. So for example, for 2021, our debt service is $154 million versus 2020 that was $146 million. I didn't do that right, 145. So it increased $9 million. And what's interesting is if you look at our MWCs, we're increasing our MWC by 2%, which is worth about $4.5 million. And you can see that, but yet our debt service went up $9 million, so it swallows it all up, which is why we need to keep our facility plans flat to last year. But there's light at the end of the tunnel. You can see it's going to drop off in 2022 and 2023, and we'll actually have our debt service will decrease in the late 20s. So we are keeping that in mind as we think about how do we manage through this crisis as well. If we can, even though it's, we face some continued debt service challenges, if we know that in the future there's some relief, then we can schedule our long-term plan accordingly. Next slide, please. We never pass up a chance to remind the region that that the region is a great value in retail sewer rates. This is based on a survey we do every 2 years, compared against a survey that the National Association of Clean Water Agency does every 3 years for peer agencies. This is where we go out and we survey all 110 communities and ask, what does 5,000 gallons a month cost in your region for wastewater treatment? So this is not just our fees, it's also the local city charges on top of that. We're only about 55 to 65% of those fees, but we are 40% less than our peer agencies. And that has been confirmed in multiple questionnaires and surveys. So we believe that's an economic advantage for the region. Next slide, please. And then I want to talk a little bit about the SAC recovery and the great progress that's been happening there. You can see we bottomed out in 2009 at 6,000 units, and we blew the doors off in 2019 at 25,000 units. Those have all allowed our SAC reserve fund to grow. And again, it's about double our target policy minimum. So we have some room in there to come in and help us get through this debt service bubble. Now we have to use SAC only for pay-go. We can't use it for operations because of the way the law is written. But we can, through pay-go, we can provide some relief for rates. Looking out long-term, we are closely monitoring our scenario, and we're doing scenario planning for SAC. Year to date, we're down about 15% in units. We're seeing that more on the commercial side than we are on the residential side. Residential is still pretty strong, probably not as strong as last year, but and we're seeing it in apartments and in single-family homes. We are doing those projections, and we're looking at does this recession last 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and are our volumes 20%, or our volumes 80%, or 50%, or 25% of historic volumes? And we're looking at all that to understand what's the long-term rate implications. Most of our projections show that we should be able to keep SAC rate flat for at least another 2 years, so 2021 and 2022. And then in 2023, there might, again, depends on what the economy does, but there might be some increases, but they'll be modest, maybe $25 to $50 per unit. So that's kind of our long term, but again, who knows? We have not seen a drastic decline yet. Again, only down 15%. But we are monitoring that, and we're making sure that we're proactive and staying ahead of it. Next slide, please. So just to walk through the budget and the rate setting schedule, we presented this proposed plan back on May 12th to the Environment Committee. We've got our municipal forums today and June 11th. The June 11th seminar is the exact same as today. And that's where we get our feedback from our customers that we then go back and share with our Environment Committee on July 14th. And the Environment Committee is a subcommittee of the Metropolitan Council. We share the feedback that we heard, and then we ask to approve the final rates if there are any changes. And then we send that to the broader council on July 22 to approve our rates. That then gets rolled up into our total budget, which is presented to the council on August 12th. And then it is presented out to the public on August 28th for 90 days of public comment. And then we take that feedback and pass the council council budget on December 9th. And with that, I will turn it over to Kyle Colvin to walk through how a 2% increase for the regional Metropolitan Wastewater Charge, how that translates to your individual city bills. Thank you.
Thank you, Ned, and good morning. This is Kyle Colvin, and I'm the manager of the Engineering Programs Group in Environmental Services. And today I'll be providing a very high-level review of the process that the council uses to determine each community's municipal wastewater charge. And I'll be introducing a new customer information portal that was recently made available for communities to obtain wastewater flow data related to the community and communicate and exchange information related to the council's regional I&I program. The council uses a proportional model to allocate its municipal wastewater charge, or MWC, to its customers. A community's MWC is based on its total flow volume, which is either measured, estimated, or a combination of both, and is compared to the total regional flow. This proportion, or percentage, is then applied to the total regional MWC budget to determine the community's total annual MWC, which is billed to the community each month in 12 equal amounts. And as Ted stated, the total regional MWC for 2021 is $240 million. There's a 2-year lag between the time this flow is generated and the time that it is used as the basis for a community billing. For example, the 2021 community MWC billings will be based on the flow generated in 2019. In the next slide, I'll be giving a couple of examples as to how the cost allocation calculation is applied and how the variability of a community's flow from one year to the next can affect its relative cost. A community's change in the percentage of the total regional flow from one year to the next is what mostly impacts their cost from one year to the next. An increase in the council's regional MWC can also have an impact on the community's cost, but usually to a lesser extent. As Ned stated earlier, the 2021 regional MWC reflects a 2% increase. The example in this slide uses the actual regional flow numbers for 2018 and 2019. The total regional flow in 2019 reflects a 10.3% increase over the 2018 regional flow. It is important to note that 2019 was the wettest year on record, and not by just a little bit, by over 15% of the recent record, which was set in 2014. This resulted in us experiencing the highest regional flow going all the way back to 2004. The examples also in the slide also use the actual regional MWC values for 2020, which was $235.6 million, and the $240 million for 2021. The figures in light blue in the far right column represents examples of the changes in the community MWC, or the annual costs billed by the council from the previous year. A community who has the same flow while the total system flow increases in the following year will see a reduction in their costs. And this is represented in the slide by City A. Communities whose flow increases in the following year may see a cost increase, and this is represented as City B. This is especially true if the increase is proportionally greater than the regional flow increase. This would be an example of a community that is impacted by I&I. During wet periods, their flow is typically higher and hence will typically see higher costs. Communities whose flow is lower during a time of increased regional flow can even see larger rate increase or cost decreases than what is shown in City A example. The susceptibility of I&I on the wastewater collection system within a community, both within the public system and the private system, can have major impacts on its wastewater flow volume and MWC costs. This is also true for smaller communities that experience significant growth during the flow allocation year. In 2019, due to the high precipitation, many of the communities who are impacted by I&I experience some of the highest cost increases in our customer base. I will now be reviewing a new tool that communities can use to obtain its wastewater flow data and communicate its progress of I&I mitigation work plans that support the Council's regional I&I programs. The Customer Portal was designed to support and enhance MCES's customer level of service by improving communication between MCES and the communities we serve. This includes providing a centralized online location for communities to obtain metered flow data and communicate I&I program related information. It provides access to timely, accurate data, either on demand if available, or through online request if the data hasn't been released yet for review. It also provides access to local public outreach materials that the Council developed that communities can use on their own websites or in their own mailers, bulletins, and notices that will assist them in local efforts related to I&I programs. And the portal also provides a means for streamlined communication with MCES staff. Every community that is served by the regional system and who has their wastewater flow metered can set up an account. Many community staff members have set up accounts. Additional accounts requests can be directed to my attention. My contact information will appear at the end of this presentation. Each community has its own customizable data dashboard that can provide the desired information that it may want to quickly access. Basic wastewater flow data is generally available within 2 or 3 days after the data is recorded. This information can assist the community in its system planning, prioritizing system improvements, and identifying the need for system response during storm events, rain events. The portal can also be used by communities that have been assigned I&I work plans by the Council to upload and download information and status reports. This will track program communication for both communities and the Council and make reporting requirements easier for communities. And it will retain these records in an electronic document system for future availability. And it will also track both local and regional progress related to I&I efforts. The Council can use this information to easily report on local efforts and determining funding needs that can be used by the Council to continue to advocate for state financial assistance for its customers. The Council is also investigating other opportunities to add functions to the Customer Portal. If anyone has suggestions or ideas as to what other enhancements or functions could be added to the portal to assist you, please direct those ideas to my attention. This concludes my portion of the presentation. I'll now turn it over to Janine Clancy, who will present on the Council's Environmental Services Capital Improvement Program. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kyle, and welcome everyone. And I sure wish this was an in-person workshop because I miss seeing everybody. But we're going to have to just go ahead and do it as a webinar for the time being. I'd also like to recognize and welcome Susan Vento. Councilmember Vento is a member of the Metropolitan Council and a member of the Environment Committee. And I'd also like to recognize Lisa Thompson, Environmental Services General Manager. And then there's several other environmental services staff who are also participating in the call. So welcome to everyone. And then finally, thank you to Metro Cities and Patty Nauman in particular for your ongoing support of our efforts to raise the awareness of our work in the region. So as many of you know, the governor's peacetime emergency exempted public works construction from the shelter-in-place order. And it is with gratitude to our cities, to our staff, our environmental services staff, our contractors and consultants, that we've continued to make progress on our capital program. Next slide, please. As the chair pointed out, environmental services serves 110 communities, about half of the state's population. Our system is valued at about $7 billion. And so we invest about $150 million a year to keep our facilities in good working order. Our organizational purpose is to protect public health, the environment, and foster the economic growth of the region. This graphic represents our customer level of service, developed in 2014 by environmental services staff in collaboration with many of our customer communities. It is the commitment that MCES has made to the cities that we serve as we plan, design, operate, and maintain the regional wastewater system. Our customer level of service, along with the Water Resources Policy Plan and our strategic plan, serve as the foundation for development of the capital program. When we execute our capital program, particularly in the Interceptor system, we ask the environmental services staff to work as partners with the cities that we serve, along with other stakeholders such as MnDOT, regional parks, and county agencies. Our staff is directed to treat customers and stakeholders respectfully, leave the community with something better than what they had prior to our project, plan and coordinate our work with other public infrastructure work, keep our promises as we transition from the planning phase through the end of construction, and then communicate in a way that the city sees as normal practice for them. The ES Capital Program is developed on an annual basis and is a component of the Metropolitan Council's unified budget. Projects in our capital program meet at least one of the objectives on the slide: to preserve assets, to meet capacity needs, or to improve the quality of our service or the safety of our staff or our residents. In 2020, about 76% of the program will be spent on asset preservation. We also break our program into plants and interceptors. On this graph, treatment plants are represented as the royal blue, and the interceptors are represented as navy blue, or almost a black color. We plan for about $150 million on average, but in 2021, 2022, and 2023, we have a large project associated with solids management at the Metro plant. So in those years, we are planning for about $175 to $180 million. From an asset management perspective, the goal of our Interceptor Renewal program is to rehabilitate about 6 to 7 miles of gravity sewers every year, 3 to 4 miles of force mains or pressure sewers, 3 lift stations, and 10 meter stations a year. We work to maintain the flexibility of our program so that we can be responsive to projects being advanced by customers and stakeholders. On the treatment plant side, we have been on ongoing renewal at the Metro plant, plus our plan includes work at our Empire Wastewater Treatment Plant, where we are improving solids management capacity and increasing energy recovery from our digesters. At Hastings, we are working on a condition assessment. This will help us further plan for the timing of the construction of the new Hastings plant. The existing Hastings plant is about 50 years old, and the current site gives us little opportunity for expansion or renewal. We plan to build a Crow River plant in Rogers to serve the growing Northwest Hennepin County area, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. We are beginning a facility planning process at our Blue Lake plant, which will identify the capital needs for this plant, and this plant serves Western Hennepin County and a portion of Scott County. And we also have smaller renewal projects at facilities located in East Bethel, St. Croix Valley, and Eagles Point in our portfolio. As we stage the large programs out to level, and we stage the large programs out to level out the impact on our rates. So in 2021 through 2024, you can see the large solids project at the Metro plant. And then in 2025 to 30, you can see that we have a number of large projects at our treatment plants coming up. And then post 2030, we anticipate ongoing and significant work in the Minneapolis-St. Paul system, the joint interceptor system, which conveys about 50% of the region's wastewater to the Metro plant, a potential water reclamation facility in the Northeast area, and then finally, renewal or replacement of our solids management at the Seneca facility. Well, how do we pay for these capital projects? And to add to what Ned said earlier, most of the costs are financed through loans from the Public Facilities Authority and sale of general obligation bonds. And Ned mentioned our pay-as-you-go program, which is about $11 million a year. And we anticipate $11 million in 2020 as well. In terms of the Public Facilities Authority, we receive a loan of about $50 million from the PFA, and that carries an interest rate of 1.5%. And we just sold a general obligation bond of $80 million. And with the council's AAA rating, Ned informed me yesterday that we got an interest rate of 1.65%. Next slide. So I selected a few projects from the capital program portfolio that I wanted to share with you. Many of you may have heard my team and I speak about the Metro Solids Management Project. This project is critical to the region for two reasons. The facilities at the Metro plant provides capacity for anticipated growth of the region, and it anticipates the renewal and facilitates the renewal, rather, of existing incinerators at the Metro plant. So this project plans for the construction of a fourth incinerator, which will have capacity to process 120 dry tons per day. And this will occur beginning in 2021 through the end of 2023. We will then renew our existing incinerators, our 3 incinerators. These incinerators will be about 20 years old at the time that we start the renewal process. This project will allow us to take each of the incinerators out of service for about a year, and they will be thoroughly renewed and then recommissioned. So our budget for the existing incinerator renewal is about $30 million. And as Ned pointed out, energy recovery is a very big part of our sustainability promise to the region. Energy recovery at the Metro plant and the Metro Solids facility saves our customers about $2.5 million a year. Earlier this year, Environmental Services executed a contract for owners, advisors, and engineering services for this project. Our selection process included panelists and customer community representatives from Maple Grove and Eagan. The council has selected the design, build, delivery method for this project, which will provide staff access to technical resources needed for the project, and also a single point of responsibility for system performance. Transitioning back to Rogers, MCES acquired the Rogers facility on July 1, 2019. Rogers and MCES staff worked together and transitioned the operations of the facility to MCES in 2019. And I'd like to thank John Seifert and his team for their partnership, as well as our operations and maintenance staff. The transition went quite well. And we've also kicked off our planning for the new Crow River plant this year. The new Crow River plant has been anticipated in our water resources policy plan for decades. The plant will serve the growing Northwest Hennepin County area and will preserve downstream capacity for growth in the urban core. Some of the work that we've started this year includes gathering the water quality data on the Crow River near the MCES plant site, a capacity analysis of the Elm Creek interceptors so that we can better understand how much flow will be offloaded to the Crow River plant from the Elm Creek interceptor. We're also working with the City of Rogers on an interceptor routing plan to figure out the options to get the flow from the existing Rogers wastewater treatment facility to the future Crow River plant. And of course, all of these studies, along with life cycle cost evaluation and environmental studies, will inform the Crow River wastewater treatment facility plan. And our goal is to have the new Rogers plant commissioned by 2030. Transitioning to work on our interceptor system, we continue to work on projects identified in the Minneapolis Interceptor System Rehabilitation Plan. Just this past September of 2019, we started work on a $19.5 million construction project to rehabilitate the existing regional sanitary sewer tunnel located near Minnehaha Creek and about 1.5 miles northwest of Coldwater Spring, which many of you know is a significant cultural and historic resource. The sewer tunnel was built in 1935 and needs repair, and regulatory equipment needs to be updated. This project will preserve the structural integrity of the tunnel and will minimize the risk of failure in this important area. The tunnel conveys about 15 million gallons of wastewater on a daily basis from the cities of Minneapolis and Medina to the Metro plant. Most of the flow, because of the amount of flow rather, a temporary conveyance system is required in order to do the rehabilitation work. And you can see that system on the photos shown on the slide. As you can imagine, the project is disruptive to park and trail users, and we have been working hard to minimize the impacts of the project to the extent possible. We plan to wrap up our work in July of 2022. And special thanks to the Minneapolis Park Board staff, the Minneapolis Public Works, MnDOT, the National Park Service, and many bike advocacy groups who have been working with us on this project. In Brooklyn Park, Environmental Service is making improvements to the regional conveyance system located just west of the Mississippi River. This system, which conveys about 11 million gallons a day, was acquired from Brooklyn Park in the late 1970s. The system provides regional conveyance and also serves as the local collection systems for homes and business. This project includes construction of a new local collection system for the city of Brooklyn Park and rehabilitation of the council's facilities. By removing the direct connections, the council will reduce risk of wastewater backing up into homes from the regional system and will address some odor complaints. And we started work on this project earlier this year and plan to wrap it up by 2021. This is a $19.8 million project, and we've been working very hard with the City of Brooklyn Park staff to advance that effort. Next slide. As we move over to St. Paul, we have rehabilitation of the Battle Creek Interceptors, which again are located in St. Paul. This project includes cured in place pipelining, manhole repair and replacement, and improvement to siphon operations. The project is driven by condition assessment, with much of the pipe and structures rated in poor to critical condition due to corrosion and structural defects. The average daily flow for this system is 6.4 million gallons a day. And again, this is a project that we're advancing in partnership with Ramsey County Parks and the City of St. Paul. Our construction is planned from late fall of 2020 to spring of 2022. And the last project I want to talk to you about is the Maple Plain, Medina, and Independence work that we are doing, which will facilitate service to the city of Loretto. And we are working with Loretto so that they can become our 111th customer. This project will also provide Loretto with a way to discontinue discharging effluent to Lake Independence, which Lake Independence, as many of you know, is impaired for phosphorus, but is a valued regional asset. The work includes rehabilitating a lift station in Maple Plain, installing a new meter structure in Independence, and installing new sewer pipe underneath County Road 19 near the Baker Park campground. Construction is anticipated to begin in the spring, or it has begun, and will be completed by the end of 2020. So finally, as you can see, our capital program focuses primarily on asset preservation. It's staged so that it does not result in large fluctuation in rates. It's responsive to the needs of the residents, and it requires a lot of collaboration and cooperation and support from our customer communities, which I'm very thankful for. If you have questions about our capital program, it's available online, or you can always contact me. Thank you, and I'll turn it back over. Oh, I have one more slide, excuse me. And it may seem early, but ES staff is starting to work on the framework for the 2050 Water Resources Policy Plan, which we hope will be adopted in either 2024 or 2025. We start very early on issues identification. The issues identification are what does a region want to see included in the policy plan? So we've identified some issues on these slides, such as chlorides, the reconveyance of regional wastewater assets, reuse, whether it be stormwater or wastewater, local surface water and water supply planning process, groundwater and surface water interactions, appropriation, and climate change. If you have any ideas about topics that you would like to be considered in the 2050 Water Resources Policy Plan, please contact Judy Spentek, who's our Manager of Water Resources, or Kyle Colvin, our Manager of Engineering Programs. Both would be happy to talk with you and take the information that you have. And on behalf of Sam Paskey and me, as the executive sponsors for the policy plan, we welcome your input. I'll turn it back to Anna. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Now, before we begin our Q&A session, I would like to mention that specific questions regarding your municipality's 2021 Municipal Wastewater Charge can be directed to Kyle Colvin after the webinar, and his team will contact you to set up a discussion. So now let's dive into the questions that we received. And as a reminder, you can submit questions using the chat button toward the bottom of your screen. The first question that we received is from Jim Koslushar with the city of Fridley. He is wondering if a copy of this presentation will be made available. And actually, I will go ahead and answer that one if that's okay. Today's presentation and all the questions from this session will be made available on the open house and budget workshop page at metrocouncil.org. And we will also be sending out a link to all attendees once those materials are posted. The next question that we received is from Luke Sandstrom with the city of Roseville. And Kyle, you may be able to answer this one. As the council's area expands and systems are added, like Rogers, does the council ever anticipate changing the way they determine flow and go to a treatment plant area for total flow determination instead of just lumping everything into one large regional flow amount? Kyle?
Yeah, thanks, Luke, for that question. It's good to hear from you. The short answer is probably no. Historically, the council and the Waste Control Commission, when it was initially established, did have a system of differentiating rates based on the service districts, and I think that was a throwback from the previous sanitary sewer districts that existed prior to the creation of the Metropolitan Sewer Board in 67. And so under the guise of regional service and the fact that, for industries particularly, having cheaper wastewater rates can incentivize where these industries or these businesses locate, the council took a regional approach and basically unified all of the wastewater rates across our portfolio of treatment plant facilities. So again, the council recognized that that if one community does well, then it basically is for the benefit of the region. So I wouldn't look for any going back to the differential rate structures anytime soon.
Thank you, Kyle. Looking to our next question here. How has or will COVID-19 affect flows, and how might that affect future rates? And Kyle, why don't we go ahead and start with you again on this one?
Okay. Sure. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. What we've been seeing is that from a regional perspective, regional flows since the onset of really the stay-at-home order or shelter-in-place order really hasn't changed much. We're still treating on an average day. We're treating about the same level of flow system-wide. However, what we have seen a little bit of a change in is the daily pattern of the flow that reaches our treatment plants. Typically, I think most people realize that there is what we call a diurnal pattern, which means that during the early morning hours, the flow starts to increase as people start getting ready for work, and then around that 4 to 6 o'clock period, p.m., you'll see the flows after the morning period. The flows will kind of drop a little bit, and as dinner time rolls around, the flows will kind of peak a little bit. So you'll have this little double hump or double peak during the daily pattern. And what we've seen since the shelter-in-place order, particularly in those communities and meter sheds that are primarily residential in nature, we've seen a flattening out, if you will, of the flow. We don't really see that twice daily peak as much. It ramps up during the morning, maybe not quite as high, and then it kind of stays level through the early evening hours, and then around normal bedtime hours, it drops off again. So from a flow standpoint, that's kind of what we're seeing. The other point, too, is that shortly after the shelter-in-place order took effect, we were in a couple of our facilities, lift station facilities, particularly the smaller ones, we were seeing problems with flushable wipes coming into the system and requiring us to go out and clean some of the pump intakes. That has since dropped off, and in the last few weeks, it hasn't been a problem for us. So those are the two primary things that we've seen in response to the wastewater system with the COVID pandemic.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. The next question is from RJ Kakik with the City of Golden Valley. Does the customer portal have the capability to pull flow data over a 10-year period? The dashboard currently shows a 3-year window. And if you like, I can go ahead and speak to that, unless one of our other panelists would like to answer. RJ, while the dashboard itself only shows 3 years worth of data, you do have the ability to pull historic data using the download feature or requesting it through the portal. And I'd like to see if anybody else would like to add to that answer before we move on. Okay. Next question we have is from Ross Jonick with the City of Minneapolis. And Ned, I think you're probably the best person to answer this one. With the debt service bubble going down in 2022, does the Metropolitan Council anticipate rates going down, considering debt service is 48% of the budget? We plan out budgets for 5 years, and having some early ideas around this would be helpful to our planning processes.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Ross, for the question. The short answer is no, because what we do plan to do is stop planning deficits. For the last couple of years, our revenue has been less than our expense. And so as that debt service bubble levels off and even goes negative, we should be able to continue with 2 to 4% rate increases and then actually balance our budget on a given year. So again, we had we're fine. We had some surpluses in the late teens. We're still well above our target for our operating reserve. So we have enough in the reserve to cover that. for the years that we need to, but in the long run, it's not sustainable. So when those debt service fees come down, we will then start planning for a balanced budget where our revenues equal our expenses. Thank you.
Thank you, Ned. Another question that came in with our registration. Can you provide more information on the portal and what information cities can obtain using the portal? Now, Kyle, I know you provided a brief overview of that. Would you like to just recap real quick?
Yeah, certainly I can do that. Right now, the information that's available is primarily meter flow data. That data is retrievable on a meter shed basis. There's some ability to track to stack, I should say, a time period. So you can kind of compare one time period to another. You can also stack meter sheds if you're a community that has multiple meter sheds. So you can kind of compare how one system, one area of the community might be responding to, let's say, wet weather as opposed to another area. So meter data currently is primarily what's available through the portal. However, it will be a communication tool to submit. If you're a community that has signed work plans, you can submit work plans for approval, the notification letters for exceedances. If you're a community that discharges flow above the threshold, those notices will go out via the portal through emails. Work completion status notices will be communicated through the portal. And then the other item that's available is that we do, as I indicated, we did provide some public education, public outreach material that's free to use. Communities can go in and download factoids, illustrations, graphics, narratives, anything that the city feels they could use in their efforts to address wastewater service within their community, with really a focus on I&I programs, information that would assist local efforts in I&I programs. But we're looking for ideas and suggestions for things to add. If there's something that communities that would like to see available or made available, we can certainly do that through the portal. This is being envisioned as kind of an interface, if you will, for our customers to obtain and share information with the council. And I think that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Kyle. This will be the last question that we have time for today. It comes from Jim Hoff from the city of Columbia Heights. Jim says, I am new to my position and the customer portal. If I am not seeing something from years past on the work plan credit, should I be adding that information in, or is the portal only going to show moving forward? Kyle, do you have comments on that question?
Yeah, there is the ability to download historical efforts in the portal. In terms of the program, I'm guessing that the fact that you're not seeing anything in there is probably reflective of maybe a completion of the city's work plan. But we can certainly provide historical information in the portal, and that might also be beneficial for the city, because now there's a place that you can go to pull that historical information up. So we can certainly talk about it within the team, the portal team, and confirm that that is something that we can go back and retroactively load documents from the community for future retrieval.
Thanks, Kyle. And Jim, we'll reach out to you about this question as well after the event. If we did not get to your question today, I'd like to let you know that you can contact Janine, Ned, or Kyle. They'd be very happy to answer any of your questions directly. As a reminder, today's presentation and all questions from this session will also be made available on our open house and budget workshop page at metrocouncil.org. And again, we will be sending a link to all attendees once the materials are posted. Finally, I'd like to bring your attention to our tentative upcoming plant tours. Pending the current situation, we have 2 tentative tours scheduled for September. The first is at our Metropolitan Wastewater Treatment Plant in St. Paul, Minnesota. It is scheduled for the afternoon of September 10th, 2020. And our second tentative tour is scheduled for Empire Wastewater Treatment Plant in Empire Township, Minnesota on September 24th, 2020, again in the afternoon. And we will be sending more information later this summer. And as a reminder, attendance is first come, first serve on our RSVP list. Finally, you'll be asked to complete a survey upon leaving the webinar. We appreciate any feedback that you can provide to us. Thank you again for joining us today and have a great morning. Thank you.